Well, hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of Loki. In this episode, we're looking at episode 2, The Variant. Now, normally we start with like a little preamble, but I don't really have anything this time. I mean, we've got some stuff to get to in the episode, so I guess let's just get to the episode. So we start off in, it's like, oh, it's setting up like, oh, we're in medieval times, right? We're in the 1400s. And then, nope, it's a Renaissance fair in Wisconsin in 1985. Ha ha ha, very funny. The Minutemen are looking for the variant and they come in, and it's like there's this thing in Renaissance fairs where people will dress up as Star Trek characters and then pretend oh, they've traveled back in time, or they're observing a pre, I don't know, whatever society. And there's a whole joke about it that oh, Star Trek nerds go to Renaissance fairs. And that's kind of what this reminds me of, is a bunch of Star Trek nerds going to Renaissance fairs. Which, I mean, yeah, whatever. But yeah, so they go into this tent and one of the Minutemen gets mind controlled or whatever and starts attacking all the other ones. We get the song Holding Out for a Hero. And God damn, this is in the past 2 weeks. This is the third time I've seen nothing use this song, because it was in the He-Man trailer. It was in the trailer for the Guardians of the Galaxy video game. And now it's in this. God, and it's a great song. Okay, yes, the original Footloose, when they used it for what? Tractor racing? That was fucking stupid. But, when you get one of the greatest movies of all time, Shrek 2, and it properly uses the song, it's okay, right, this is appreciated, this song's amazing. And yeah, it's just the past 2 weeks, it's been showing up in a bunch of stuff, and I mean, it's a great song, so yeah, I'm down for it. Admittedly, out of all the places I've seen it the past week, this is the most out of place. It made sense in He-Man, it made sense in Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Especially because they're trying to do the movie, and the Guardians of the Galaxy trailer also used, is the song called Reputation? I don't remember, but whatever it is, right? It makes sense for Guardians of the Galaxy. But this, it doesn't really work as well, but it's here, and yeah, whatever. It's a fine song. But yeah, all the Minutemen, the one mind-controlled one beats up all the other ones, then they all get knocked out, and the variant grabs the one that they mind-controlled and takes them through a time portal, right? Steals their time travel gizmo dealy and takes them through, yeah, a time portal. And that's our cold open. After that, we see Loki, and he's studying, right? He's basically training to be not a Minuteman, but right, someone. He's going through all the briefings, watching all the videos, and we get this scene of him and Miss Minutes is quizzing him. I like that Miss Minutes is not just I compared her to the DNA guy from Jurassic Park. I like that it's no, Miss Minutes is actually a real thing, and it's is it a recording? Is it real? Right? Who knows? And the answers are vague at best. Yeah, that's neat. And you get your little childish mischief. Later on in this episode, Mobius calls Loki a scared child. And yeah, him messing with Miss Minutes in this opening moment is yep, that's very childish. But from there, they have their mission briefing. They're going to the Renaissance Fair. We find out about the different types of Loki variants. One is a giant ogre. One is just blue Loki. Another one is Tour de France Loki, which, okay. But yeah, all the different types of Loki variants. That Loki variants are actually very common. That this is not a new thing or anything, that Loki has a bunch of variants as a god of mischief. Yeah, sure, that makes sense. This entire time, Mobius is seeing through everything Loki does, and Mobius just calls out Loki oh, the only reason you're helping us is because you want to get closer to the Timekeepers and you want to betray them. He says that several times throughout this, but yeah, this is our first inclination that no, he knows Loki's exact plan, that he wants to get closer to the Timekeepers, and Loki keeps asking about it. So yeah, that's where we get that thing of that. As they head into the Renaissance Fair, this is our setup for the reset charges, where it's oh, the reset charges are supposed to fix time, right? You plant them, they go off and they destroy everything, but they correct the timeline. But this moment also establishes that while they fix time, they also do disintegrate things, right? They also are forces of destruction. So that's our setup for what happens at the end of the episode. And that's our Chekhov's bomb, if you will. They're in the tent, and Loki's like, oh, we can't leave, right? The variant's outside waiting for us. Loki basically stalls for time in this moment, which, as the audience, we know is pointless because we know the variant has already left, right? They took the hostage and went through a time portal. So we know the variant is gone, but instead we get this big, like, monologue from Loki about like the wolves, where there are wolves' ear there are wolf teeth, and right, and that he's got sharp ears and sharp teeth. It's all him stalling, because as they approach closer to the red line, and the red line's the point beyond, it's the point beyond change, so it's just Loki stalling for time. And yeah, I'm not, again, as the audience, we know it's pointless because the variant's already gone. But of course, Loki reveals his grand machinations, that he's just trying to see the timekeepers, right? That by helping them out, he's trying to see the timekeepers. But Mobius, of course, sees through his plans, because even though Loki will later on say he's like 10 steps ahead, he's also very predictable. And yeah, Mobius sees through him throughout this entire thing. Once they see through it, they just put the reset bomb down and leave. And then we have Mobius and talking to the judge, Rovana, I think that's it. And right, and it's like, oh, you botched the mission, right? Your Loki variant stalled for time. And Mobius is like, well, we know Loki stalls for time, which is another thing set up in this episode that does get its payoff in this episode. I said that in the last episode, that a lot, right? It does a good job of setup and payoff. We know Loki likes to stall for time. Last episode, they make a joke about how, oh, we know Loki loves to talk. Yeah, in this one, it's a lot of how Loki loves to talk. And even in a minute, Mobius will call out Loki for loving to talk. But yeah, the judge also informs them that the timekeepers are monitoring this case, that the timekeepers are very invested in what's going on here. Because from what it sounds like, the timekeepers don't actually have, like, they're not omniscient. Like, even though they control the flow of time, and right, they determine what is the proper flow of time, they aren't actually omniscient. And as it's explained in a previous scene, when like a branch in the multiverse starts to form, you can't you can't like travel back before the branch was created. You have to travel into real time in the branch, because it's like it's newly forming as it's happening. Which, yeah, okay, that's our explanation for that. And the fact that timekeepers aren't, right, they're not omniscient gods, control the flow of time, but they're not actually like all controlling or anything. Loki talks to Morbius, and it's like Loki, throughout this and throughout everything that's happened so far in this episode, he keeps calling himself the superior version of Loki, and that he's trying to catch a lesser version of Loki. But then in this moment, Mobius calls him out on that, and it's like, no, this other Loki is clearly the superior version. You know it, and that should, right, fuel your insecurity to prove that you're better than the superior Loki, right? And yeah, that fits with the character. He's very prideful. So the idea that there's another Loki who's better than him, and now he wants to stop it, right? That makes sense, because his motivations, whether that's his motivation or his motivation is, right, getting to the timekeepers and taking over the TVA, and both of those can exist at the same time, they both make sense for the character, right? Because he is very prideful. And when we get to the variant later, they're also very prideful. That's just kind of how Loki is. And yeah, this is where Loki gives the whole, oh, I'm 10 steps ahead of you. And Mobius is just like, no, you aren't. What, you plan on manipulating the timekeepers into taking control of the TVA? Like, that's ever going to happen, right? Mobius can see through him. And that's a lot of, that was established last episode with like the whole deconstruction of his characters, that he's very, for all that we like Loki, right? We like Loki in like the first Thor's, whatever, but in Avengers Endgame, or in Avengers, the first Avengers, we like Loki. He's the one good thing in Dark World. He's great in Ragnarok. His moment in Infinity War are great. We like him more for the personality. Like, Loki's schemes are never actually that complex. I mean, yeah, he triple fakes out his death, but like, other than that, no, he is not a very deep character. He's just a very fun character. And right, that goes to Tom Hiddleston just doing a great job at acting the character, because he brings a lot of emotion to the role, and he brings gravitas to it. And that definitely that shows in all the movies that we like Loki in, and that shows in this, right? We like Loki in this, and he is very vain, right? He has a very high image of himself, even though throughout it, everyone is deconstructing him. And yeah, Mobius calls him like a scared little boy left out in the cold. This is all about what Loki is, what makes him tick, right? From there, Mobius parks him at a desk and tells him to go over all the case files. He reads through them, gets bored, tries to find out about like the TVA and like the beginning or end of time. Can't get any information on that. So instead, he gets information about the variant and presumably himself, which is where he finds out about the destruction of Asgard. Now, I do have some questions here, because they called the destruction of Asgard a Class 7 apocalypse. Now, later on, when they go to Roxcart, they call that a Class 10 apocalypse. So my question is, what's the difference? Because I would assume the destruction of an entire planet would be a bigger deal than just the destruction of, right, like a town in Alabama. But I don't know. So that's one question I had about. Also on the document, it says entire civilization annihilated, with it's around 10,000 people. It's a little less than 10,000 people dead, but we know some people made it off Asgard, right? Including Loki himself. He makes it off Asgard. And of course, then after that, however many people make it off, those numbers get cut in half again with Thanos. It does ask the question, if they're saying entire civilization annihilated, and this is something confirmed on the canon timeline, that's kind of, because again, now, like I said last episode, as far as Loki knows, Thor is dead, right? Because his scene ends with the ship blowing up. So as far as he knows, as far as he knows, he and his brother are dead. And now he knows that Ragnarok happened and Asgard was destroyed. So yeah, everything he knows is gone and dead, even though, as we know, Thor survives, and half of whatever escaped from Asgard survived. I think it's half, because right, even though their population, because some people totally died when Asgard was destroyed, right? Let's be real here. Some people, they say 10,000 deaths, and then I'm assuming 10,000. I'm assuming no matter what, 10,000 people still died, but let's say only 300 made it out, and then 150 only escaped from Thanos. So that's kind of I do have questions about that. Of course, also in the document there is reference to the Revengers, right? Which is the joke that Thor makes in Ragnarok. So that's also a neat thing, but there's a lot of neat little things. At the very end of this episode, there's references to a bunch of different places in the MCU, but I guess we'll talk about it at the end. But from reading this thing about the destruction of Asgard, Loki figures out that the variant must be hiding out in apocalypses. That if everything is going to be destroyed, well, then nothing matters. You can do whatever you want, because no matter what you do, everything is going to be destroyed. And I think that's actually, that's something I think that's very clever in this show, right? This whole, because right, we know how the variance things work and how different timelines are created. But if everything is destroyed, then yeah, it doesn't matter what you do, because everything is going to be destroyed regardless. You can't change the time, unless the only way you could change the timeline is to stop the destruction. And at no point is that anybody's plan. So yeah, no, I think that's actually very clever. From there, we get the salad metaphor, where he's he puts salt and pepper on the thing and then pours the juice on it or whatever, and right, it just disappears. It's a fine metaphor. It reminds it well, I know food metaphors are used in all sorts of things. What it reminds me of is there's a College Humor bit called Just Let the World Die, which is about a meteor, right? A meteor about to hit the earth, and they use a coffee cake and they cover it in water and tomato juice, and they put a sock on it, and it's this is a representation of everything shitty on earth, right? And then the world is saved by Star Wars, right? Star Wars The Last Jedi, everybody's favorite Star Wars movie. I'm not joking though. Star Wars The Last Jedi is I don't know if I'd say it's the best, but it's definitely top 3. It's an amazing movie. I will not hear any bullshit about it. Get in the comments. So the salad metaphor, that's just what that reminded me of. And then we get the little conversation about like, oh, you stab people in the back all the time. You love stabbing people in the back, which is, yeah, of course, that's Loki's plan. That's where his end game is. He even admits it later to the variant. From there, they head back to Pompeii to test out his theory about near apocalypses and if they can change the time period. And Loki just goes around causing chaos. He releases some goats. He causes mischief, I guess. He speaks in Latin, telling people that he is the god Loki, that they're all gonna die, that they're from the future, question mark? Because yeah, where is the TVA? From what again, comic Drake, yeah, the TVA exists outside of the multiverse in like its own timeless dimension or something like that. I don't know. Go watch the video. It's comic Drake, of course. He's great at what he does. But yeah, Loki causes some mischief, and then the volcano goes off, and yeah, no time variance because nothing they do matters. Because everyone's going to die, right? Like you can't create a new timeline. So of course his theory is correct. From there, they go back and they're trying to figure out like where, because now they know where the variant could be. They just have to find a specific place in time, right? They need a where and a when. So they go back, they get bored doing a little research. They then have a discussion on basically purpose and the meaning of life, right? This is where we find out about Morbius's obsession with jet skis, which is that's one of those like fun things, you know, like when the character out of like, God, I can't think of any good examples, but shit like this happens all the time where like characters are like, oh, they're outside of like the normal circumstances or they're time traveling or whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, I've always heard about said thing. And now I can actually see it. And we find out Mobius's obsession is with jet skis, which, I mean, to be fair, now that they know that there is a blank spot in time that they can go to and do whatever they want, theoretically, they could go before a tsunami and go out jet skiing and get away with it, right? Like that was just set up that that's something they could do. Will the show do it? I don't know. After that, they talk about how it is, and Mobius is like, oh, I just accept things the way it is, right? I was created by the Timekeepers. I accept it the way it is. And that the way things are created is chaos, right? That nothing makes sense. Everything's just kind of a little silly when you think about it, right? Like the fact that there are the timekeepers who watch over the sacred timeline and that Mobius was created by them and now he has to watch over time, or right? He's a investigator. That's a little silly. Or the fact that Loki was a frost giant adopted by Odin who went on to try to like take over the 9 realms and whatnot. That's just a little silly. It's all chaos, but you know, there's, right, you just don't want to think about it. Yeah, Mobius gives that, oh, he knows he was created by the Timekeepers. He knows his own glorious purpose, right? Last episode. And he does the whole I think therefore I am, right? I exist, I think, that means I am real, right? I was created by the Timekeepers. Okay. Loki gets to what I was talking about last episode about like, on the timeline, do they have free will? And yeah, Mobius is kind of like, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but no, not really. That leads us to Loki being like, well, okay, on the timeline, you don't have free will, but here in the TVA, you do have free will, right? Anything is possible outside of time. Because, right, the timekeepers are entangling time, but here in the TVA, anything is possible. So yeah, it's exactly what I was saying last episode. And then we get the timekeepers, and it explains that the timekeepers are untangling the end of time, right? That's what they're so busy doing, is figuring out how time ends. Because yeah, we've seen the past. Because the whole timekeepers authority, the whole TVA is meant to protect the past to make sure the end happens, right? That's their whole goal, because the end hasn't, because like they go to the future, like 2040 something in this. I think it's actually 2050. We know that's in the future, but we don't know when the end is, right? Like the whole thing is the timekeepers will eventually create the end of time, because wherever they are now, everything then exists in the past. And once they get to the end, right, the whole timeline, once they get to the end of time, everything has been determined. There will be no more variants, and the universe will finally find peace. So yeah, everything is more predetermined by the timekeepers, but they also don't know when time ends yet. They're still working on that. And then Loki calls out the whole, "Oh, I'm not a child" thing, because I know that within all good there is some bad, and within all bad there is a bit of good, right? Which of course is talking about himself, because even though he is the bad guy, he still has that bit of good in him that we see in Ragnarok, Dark World, and the beginning of Infinity War. So after that, they go back to looking through. They talk about the kablooey gum or candy. It looked like gum to me, but I guess it was candy from the last episode. You know, the one that I thought kind of looked like a frost giant. I still kind of do personally, but they find that and they're like, okay, this gum, this candy only exists for like a 6-year period. So it's gotta be, so the apocalypse has to be sometime within that 6-year period. And Loki eventually figures out that it's a hurricane and some like Hicksville, Alabama, and 2050. So that's their time period. Mobius talks to the judge, gets approval for the mission. So yeah, they're heading to Roxcart. Now, I'm assuming Roxcart is like the MCU's version of like Walmart, right? Like, you know how like all like these different shows and comic books, like, you know, you got to use your royalty free parodies of things, right? Like instead of McDonald's, the DCU has Bat Burger. Which comic book is it that has Big Time Burger? I don't remember, but either way, right? So they go to Roxcart. This is where we find out it's the Class 10 apocalypse, which again, I don't get the system, because a hurricane seems much smaller. I mean, I know everyone dies, and maybe it is based on casualty, like the fact that people made it off Asgard means that no, whereas in this situation everybody in the vicinity dies. So when they get there, Loki goes off with B-15, Mobius goes off with the rest of the crew, and like Mobius and the crew, like they go to the people and like they rummage around their stuff, and Mobius is like, no, don't hurt the people, right? They're scared, they're all about to die. And yeah, they also go back and they find C90, the one who was kidnapped earlier. Loki meanwhile goes off with B-15. He uses the magic to dry himself off, which is like, oh, that's kind of right, that's a very Loki move. We see the variant and it starts like a countdown timer. It's like a 20-minute timer that they go around, they find a guy looking at plants. And when B-15 touches him, like we see like a green glow, and now whoever was possessing the guy is now possessing B-15, and it's the other Loki. And Loki calls him out as like, oh, you're using enchantment, an effective if cowardly technique. That's the first giveaway. That's the first giveaway to what's going on, and we'll talk about it at the end. But yeah, that's my guess where all this is going. After that, Loki, because they switch around to like 3 or 4 different people. They go from B-15 to some guy named Randy to some like big biker dude, right? The variant switches around because they just call themselves the variant throughout this thing. Basically, Loki makes them the offer to like join me as my like lieutenant to overthrow the timekeepers, because it's the whole thing of like which Loki is the superior Loki. That Loki, right, the one we've been following, is claiming that, oh, right, I went undercover, I've gained their trust, and now I just got to get them to take me to the timekeepers, and I will overthrow the timekeepers. Whereas this other Loki doesn't really like reveal what their end game is, but based on what's about to happen, we at least know what they're trying to do, which is just disrupt the timeline. Also, during this, the variant Loki says not to call them Loki, like that they don't like the name Loki. So, and they use the name, like at one point they're possessing a guy named like Randy. But I also think that the whole "don't call me Loki" is leading to what's eventually coming. Also, that the other Loki, the variant, admits that they don't want to rule the TVA, right? Like that's not their end goal. That's not their plan. They have no interest in Loki's plan of ruling the TVA. That's passe, if you will. After that, they find the captured agent, and the captured agent tells them that, oh, they gave away their right? They gave away the location of the timekeepers. The way I'm taking that is that the variant now knows how to get to the TVA. I don't think they know directly how to get to the timekeepers, even though I could see the end game being trying to kill the timekeepers. The way I'm taking it, though, for the moment is just like, hey, now they know how to get to the TVA. Also, B-15 wakes up and meets up with the others, and it's like, I don't know what happened, but we've been betrayed. After that, this is where like the variant turns into like the biker and starts beating up Loki and says like, oh, you just love to hear yourself talk. Because again, it was set up that Loki loves to talk and the variant also loves to talk. And they were just stalling for time because we know there was a timer in the background. So we get the fight scene. Loki sees the reset bombs and is like, oh, you're going to blow the place up. That's it, right? You've lured us all here and now you're going to blow it up. I actually think what happens is way more clever than that. So we get our fight scene between Loki and this, like, in the variant possessing like this biker dude, and it's fine. It's not very complicated. Like there's like how the most complicated thing that happens is like Loki magics a Roomba to him. But like other than that, nothing else really happens. And yeah, it's all about stalling from time. And Loki's like, what do you want from me? And the variant's like, this isn't about you. And that's when they finally reveal themselves. They take off their hood and it's a lady Loki. So from what I have seen on Twitter over the past few days, Lady Loki is a thing in the comics, right? There is like a Lady Loki in the comics. So maybe that's where they're going with this. The other thing is, I guess before the show was released, so like last week sometime, like 2 weeks ago or whenever, Tom Hiddleston did an interview and they talked about how Loki is non-binary, right? How Loki can play both male and female, that they exist right beyond the binary, which I guess from what I was told is something at the time when the interview came out, people were like, yeah, that is a thing in the comics, right? The comics have addressed that. And I mean, even mythology, like that has precedent in the mythology itself. So yeah, okay, I'm down for that, but only if the show addresses it, right? Like if the comics address it, that's great. But it only matters in the show if the show addresses it, right? Like I don't want any of this J.K. Rowling bullshit, that fucking turf, who's like, oh guys, Dumbledore is gay, and then it's never brought up once in the books, but then it's like, oh, we're doing Fantastic Beasts, which are prequels and Dumbledore's in them, and it's like, okay, so you're gonna finally address it here, right? That Dumbledore is gay, and we're gonna see it, and we're gonna see his relationship with, I've never read Harry Potter, so I wouldn't know, and no, it's never mentioned once. Because fuck J.K. Rowling, that fucking turf. But yeah, no, if you're gonna do representation, you can't just say it in interviews. You need to actually fucking do it. And I think there's potential here for them to do it. So I hope they go into it. That's what I'm saying. If they're going to talk about it in these interviews, I'm not just going to give them points, because there's like every few months there's a new Disney article that's like, is this Disney's first gay character? For like the past like 4 years, there's been like articles like, is this Disney's first gay character? Because Disney just won't fucking commit. And then the one movie they had about a gay protagonist, they just fucking canceled. So yeah, fuck Disney. I know the TV show stuff is like, I hear great things about the Owl House. Haven't seen it. Really want to. I've actually been thinking about watching it recently. You know what I'm saying, right? When Disney is very fickle on these things. So, but if you're going to do it, fucking do it. The variant sets off the reset charges, and there's a shitload of them. But instead of just like blowing them up and blowing up the place, no, there's a bunch of time portals open, and they're sent all throughout time, basically they bomb the timeline. Because, right, as it was established, the reset bombs, while they fix time, they also disintegrate anything. So theoretically, by just throwing them at random places in time, you can just create a bunch of problems throughout time by disintegrating whatever is there. And like we see, like we cut to the TVA as we see the timeline like branching off and doing all these weird things, and we see like a list of like places that have been bombed, and of course it's like Wakanda, New York, Asgard. There's like a bunch of references to places that have been bombed. I think they even mentioned some other like planets that we know about. Whatever, right? There's a bunch of quick references here like that just appear quickly on a monitor, so that's neat. And then the variant escapes, creates the time portal and escapes, and Loki follows. And that's where the episode ends. It's a fine episode. I like it. I like a lot of the moments of like them like slowing down to like talk about what's going on, I think are good, right? Like that whole discussion between Mobius and Loki about like the purpose of free will and like knowing about the end of time and all that. I'm like, yeah, I'm down for that. I like the idea of the whole being able to hide out in apocalypses. I think that's right, like time travel in the MCU is bullshit. But because of how it's been established, I feel like this is a very clever workaround for the situation. So I like that. I like the idea of being able to hide out in apocalypses. And I like here at the end that the variant isn't just Loki, right? Right now they're going with, it's Lady Loki, but I think it's more complicated than that, right? Because they don't want to be called Loki. And Loki says that, oh, as magic-wise, they use enchantment. Now, there is an MCU, or there is a Marvel villain called, a Thor villain specifically called the Enchantress. So my guess is that this Loki variant is the Enchantress. Because, yeah, I mean, when else are we going to use the character? I mean, we know the next Thor is using Gore the God Butcher. So using the Enchantress here, especially as a villain to Loki, someone else who can do magic, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I'm down for that. The only thing I know about the Enchantress is in Secret Wars, where her and Thor run off, they bang, and then Thor asks her to betray the other villains, and she says no. That's the only thing I know about the character. So yeah, but no, I think the Enchantress is like, yeah, if that's where they're going with this, A-okay with that. I think that makes sense. But I guess there is a precedent for a Lady Loki in the comics, so that might be where they're going with it. I don't know. Anything's possible from here. And yeah, as the second episode goes, yeah, this is fine. It's more of like our True Detective style thing that the last episode was going for. I like it well enough. I do kind of wish there was a little bit more mystery to things, but we're establishing we're establishing our multiverse of madness at the end of the episode, and now we can go off into complete chaos from here. So I'm down for wherever this goes. Want to just see them do interesting things, because like one of the things I was thinking is that like, oh, they're probably gonna save the timekeepers for like the very end of the show. We might actually see them before that. Probably not, because I still think that's a big end game thing for the end of the series, show, whatever. But who knows? Maybe we'll get them sooner rather than later. Yeah, no, I'm invested so far. I like how this episode works. It ebbs and flows really well, and yeah, we'll see where it goes. It's only a 6-episode series, as I found out, so yeah, there's still a lot of room to play around with, and yeah, I hope we get some good stuff from here. I hope you all enjoyed. Stay tuned for more. Until next time, peace.